Right, welcome everybody to our next lesson, lesson number 3. So we're doing portraits at the moment. We've spent some time looking at proportions of the face using pencils, and we've also been drawing people with hats and everything as well. And last week I introduced the idea of using the skin tone pencils in order to add some colour to the work that we're doing. So there's only like 3 different colours that we were using to do that: a medium, a lighter tone and a darker tone, and combining those together to make something that has more depth. And also we were inspired by some of the different artists that I introduced, or some of the images of drawings that I introduced as well. So last week I mentioned that we would take one of your pencil drawings and tint it or add some colour to it using watercolour. So the way that I approached that was the whole picture. I did kind of what you might call an underpainting with a single colour, a blue, in order to add those tones, to map out the form of the face. And then following that I started to build in other colours, including some skin tones. So I used alizarin crimson hue, and I used a bit of ultramarine and yellow ochre to create that. So obviously with watercolours it's quite nice too, because you can vary the amount of water you put with those, so you can do much lighter layers of colour, and then build those layers of colour on top of each other to create the end product. So I'm going to show you the one that I did again, and then just give you a quick demonstration on how to use the watercolours, or at least how to get started. Now the one thing I know, of course, is that if you spend a lot of time working on your favourite a pencil drawing and you're absolutely really proud of it, you may feel that you don't want to paint over the top of it, which is absolutely fine. So one thing you can do is get the outlines of your of a portrait, a new one if you like, and then just start working in with a watercolour and apply some pencil on top of that. So the process I'm doing, or the one that I've done, is pencil drawing watercolour, but you could do watercolour and pencil over the top of that. But there's lots of flexibility with it. But the idea is to add some colour to your pencil drawings, essentially. Very much like the artist Turner. Turner went out, he didn't do as many portraits admittedly, but he did go out and draw the landscapes of the country and then add colour to them as a kind of a reference. But there are beautiful things in their own right, of course. So that's where this idea has come from. So we'll go over to the desk and I'll show you a few of the pictures just to remind you of what we're doing, and then we'll go over to my desk and we'll have a look at this picture once more as well. Okay, here we go. Here we go. There we go. So if you remember the theme that I kind of chose with this portraits, and you've seen these ones before now, and there's loads more on the drive actually that I've been printing off. I've got a little pile of them. I might show you those in a few minutes. But it's people with hats essentially. So your model should have a hat. If it hasn't, doesn't matter too much, but it's just a nice way that we can add a little bit more character, or we can use the character that hats create to help us with our work. Also they cast these nice shadows across the face, and they also often, like the lady up there and on the top left hand corner, they frame the face in a sense as well. So they're very very nice things to use within one of our pictures. Okay, so let me just see if I've got the right buttons. Yep, there we go. And then of course we have looked at these different drawing styles, and one of the things I kind of encouraged you to do last week and the week before is to use a different way of approaching the pencil drawing. So one of the things that I suggested, and indeed that's what I used in my own portrait, is to use hatching, cross hatching, and and things. So there's a few different ones on here that used it, particularly the blue one down the bottom there, and then we've got some other varying techniques that I showed you last week as well, including like more of a scribbly one with the dog. It gets this very soft kind of emotive effect, and then the fellow next to him on the right, we've got these much more looser expressive marks which actually go with his smile quite well. And then we've got the other one, the sort of one with the yellowy support or background, is much more kind of softer and looser in a way, and doesn't really overemphasize the contrast and the detail like the blue one. All right, so that's those, and I've got a picture. Oh, let's just get rid of that. There we go. So this is the one that I did before, and just to sort of remind you of how I chose to approach it, I have used lots of these lines to show the contour and the shape of the head. And then what I did next is start to apply the colour over the top by just painting the whole thing with some tints of blue colour in order to start to bring this to life using a bit of that. All right, so I'm going to take you over to the desk and just remind you of the colour pencils that we were using last time. And then, I mean, if you're still doing that, please continue working on the colour pencils, but I shall be working with the watercolours and maybe doing another drawing tonight. Okay, so let's go over to the desk. There we go. So on here we have the version of the drawing that we began this course with. So let's get in a little bit closer. And again, I've used lots of, getting a bit closer than that maybe. Yep, so again, you can see how the lines have gradually built up over the surface of the image in order to create this sense of depth. And I spent a lot of time going back into the detail and making areas darker, or as I noticed more detail, I was then starting to add that in as I progressed through this picture. On this side, it's a bit confusing, but this side is just 3 colour pencils from the Giotto set. And on this side of the face, that was where I just did a little bit of watercolour to show you what I meant about the tinting. So this one is, oh gosh, yes, look, here he comes. This one is the chap that I was painting from that drawing that I showed you earlier on. So as you can see from down here, we've got all the watercolour in the blue. Now there is another colour in there because I started adding other bits in like purples and things, but I also did his face as well as the hat and the scarf and coat and everything with the blue first of all, and then I started to apply different mixtures of the skin tone that we were talking about previously. So if you've got a pencil drawing and you're happy to start working over that today with your watercolor, then please do that. But this is something that I started working with, and what I'm hoping is that we can work with some chalk pastels as well in the next week or so. So these are the chalk pastels that I've got here. Some Derwent, well, they're not chalk pastels, they're pastel pencils is the correct name for them. But there's some artworks you might have seen on the drive which show some artworks made with this with these materials. And over here I've got some of this chalk pastel paper as well, which we'll look at a little bit more next week, and some of the artworks that go with that. Now, one of the things that also inspired me to have a look at this chalk pastel stuff is this sort of picture here. Let me see if I can get in a bit close to that. I've got a couple more actually. So rather than just think, oh, I'm going to paint the whole of this portrait, what you can also do is think a little bit more about the composition that you're working with and what things are most important to you that you would like the viewer of your artwork to be drawn to. So on this chap here, we've got this really lovely shadow, and then we've got the highlights on his face and his cigarette, and then just a hint of his hat up the top there. So it's kind of drawing your attention to one particular area. So this is what I thought we would perhaps look at next. Now, the reason I've gone on to that is because I started to think about it whilst I was adding some colour to this picture. So let's come back out again. So on here, just come out a bit more actually, if I can. There we go. So on this one, what I did is I used some carbon paper to get a very quick outline of this picture. So the idea behind that was to be able to actually select the area that I wanted to draw as I traced it out. So as you can see on this picture, I've used the watercolour very much like we are tonight, but I'm going to emphasize just one part of the image and have less details on things like the hats and the clothing. So there'll be more of an emphasis around this area here. Okay, so I've got my watercolours over here, so I'll bring them in. So as we did watercolours last class, so you'll be aware of a lot of this anyway, but the stronger you mix your watercolour, the darker it's going to be. So we can put down some of that there and add a little bit of water, make it lighter. So a similar sort of thing to perhaps using a bit of ink. But I suggest starting off very, very lightly, like with this one over here, and then start to add in the tones on the relevant areas. I need to get this picture out actually. Somebody else took it at the last lesson so they could work on it. So you can paint in just with the blue or with another colour if you want. Some people use different colours in the last lesson. And then when you get to an edge, add water onto your brush just so you can blend it out a little bit. Sorry, it's getting a bit dark, a bit light, isn't it? It's getting a bit closer again. A bit too close. There we go. So as with the picture over here, we have got an emphasis on one part of the image in order to draw attention to it. So I thought that'd be a really nice thing to both think about colour but also composition. So if you decided that you don't want to paint your drawing, this is what you could do. Is get a nice outline of your picture so that then you can start applying the watercolour to it like this. And then what I'm going to do is add a little bit more colour once I've finished working on this area here. I'll just get my photograph in a second actually. I forgot to get it out. There we go. So very much like the photo over here. Oops. This photo. I'm looking at the shadows and the light cast on the face as my main focus for this painting here. All right, and then I might work back into it with some normal pencil as well. So it's a little bit mixed media in a way, but also it's about exploring the tones and the shadows in the image as well. Okay. All right. So we've had a look then at how to use these watercolors to essentially create a kind of a monotone painting to begin with. So the key thing here is to not to dive straight in with the super dark tones and all that sort of thing. What you need to do is gradually build in the tone, because essentially you can refine what you're doing as you progress through the work that you're making, and you give yourself more time to make observations about the different parts of the picture that you need to alter or improve upon as well. So as mentioned, I am working on just looking at highlighting a particular part of the picture. I'm doing her whole face but not emphasizing the hat so much or the clothing. So it's more about her face expression and the light that falls on that. A little bit later on during this part of the video, I will during this part of the film, I add a few textured marks in, say, things like the hat and the clothing, just to give more of a hint of those things as well. And one of the things I did after, because I mainly just stick with this blue watercolor and a little bit of skin tone as far as I'll get, but after the lesson I carried on going and I added like a 6B graphite pencil on top of what you can see me doing here, which I felt worked quite nicely actually, and you can see that on the thumbnail of this video. So when you're looking at the tone of something, I'm working from a black and white photo here, but when you're working from the tone of something, you can use your camera, if you've got a color photo, to turn it into a black and white image. You can also enhance the tone so you can see it a bit more clearly. But if you're not going to do those things, the other thing you can do is, if you squint your eyes and look through your kind of eyelashes a little bit, you should be able to see more clearly where the patches of darker tone are appearing within your photograph or your subject. That's quite a useful little way of looking at things as well. So you can already see that I've layered quite a few, I've already got quite a few layers on here, particularly around the hat area. I've gone in a little bit dark on this eye too early, but I'm not too worried, because it just gives me a marker really of how much more tone I'm going to add in order to balance everything out and give it this strong, impactful feel. I'm avoiding at this point putting too many of the old wrinkles in on her face. In fact, I do add more of this with the pencil, including things like her hair and so forth. I do a bit more of that later on after the video. The whole idea of this was to add in, to mix together watercolor and graphite pencil as well, wasn't it? So the interesting thing, of course, and I mentioned this, is the more time you have to look at your subject, the more you notice, and there's always like more details than perhaps you'd notice just at a glance or even after a few minutes of drawing. So it really gets you to study how the form and the shape of this person that you're painting is created in order to get this sense of 3 dimensions in the image. So one of the things that I've done here as well is I've moved away from the face a little bit, and I've painted the background of the hat and a little bit around the background of her face as well, because we've got some strong or lighter imagery around the hat and that part of the face. So adding a bit of tone into the background places her in a space, I suppose, but also it emphasizes those highlighted areas within the image too. So quite absorbing as a way of working, really, today. And it's always lovely to see your subject come to life as well. So there you can see I've added some marks, as I mentioned earlier, on the hat, and some shadows on the hat as well. But the darker areas is what I meant, adding a little bit of kind of texture. And the colours that I start to use a bit of colour on the face at some point in a moment. So I'm using some yellow ochre alizarin crimson hue. I probably haven't said that right, doesn't matter. And a touch of the blue that's there already. So that's all I'm using here to bring in a little bit of that skin tone and build that into the image. And again, this is quite fun to do. So again, as in that images that I showed earlier with the highlights, I'm emphasizing one part of the picture in order to draw the viewer's attention to it. You might argue that the hat and the clothing are also really, really interesting and worth a little bit more work, but yes, I think you're probably right if you thought that. I just had time to do this face today, so I'm happy with that. And then afterwards I worked into this with graphite pencil, as I mentioned. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed looking at this video. Why don't you have a go yourself? I'm sure you can create something just as good, if not even better. And it's a great way to be absorbed in the art that you're creating, to have some time to spend making something. Anyway, don't forget to like and follow, and I'll see you next time.